We continue having a conversation about our economy. This time, let's get a bit technical and understand our salary crisis. What's it about our public debt and our responsibilities as people, and also what is the responsibility of Parliament on this particular issue? We are now joined by an economist and financial expert, Dr. Patrick Muinde. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning. Good morning to you, Eric.
Good to have you on the show. Have you been here this year?
Yes. I think at the beginning of the year.
It was earlier in January.
Early in January, yes.
Okay.
I think we were
Happy
sharing the
Easter.
platform. Yes.
Happy Easter, my brother.
Happy Easter.
You're well?
I'm well.
Kabisa.
Yeah.
City has the day's proverb.
Yes, from the Republic of Mali. A deaf man may not have heard the thunder, but will surely see the rain.
A deaf man may
Not have heard the thunder, but will surely see the rain.
What do you make of that, Patrick?
I think my interpretation is that if something happens and it has consequences, whether you hear it or not, you'll eventually be able to see and witness what the consequences are.
You'll experience it.
Yes,
You'll experience the consequences.
The consequences, yes.
Mm-hmm. With that in mind, are we experiencing consequences of a thunder we may not have had?
Yes, we are going through probably something that has been building up over the last almost 10 years. And I think those of us who have been looking at data and evidence, it was always coming. It was always coming.
So what was always coming, Patrick? I mean, let's be clear.
The crisis that we are in.
There are many things that have come.
And I would also like to ask, since we are in the question asking mode, what crisis are we actually in?
First we pick from what you're seeing from the news.
Okay.
That public officers have not been able to get salaries. And more critically, state officers like members of parliament. Because them they draw their salaries direct from the exchequer. So if you're not paid them, it's not like the rest of the people downstream who have to wait the money to be released by treasury. State officers, their money is drawn direct from the exchequer, so it's charged direct to the exchequer.
So them, it's not Jogona Ndongo and his moods.
Yes.
Theirs comes directly
right from the source.
The source to the Parliamentary Service Commission to them.
To them, yes.
Okay.
So when you see it at that level, I think it speaks a lot. But more important, this is unprecedented. I think I don't remember when government was not able to pay salaries on time. At least the national government. In the counties or some counties, they have been having challenges here and there.
In the counties, and it is normal. You know, it is normal for salaries to delay. It is normal
for disbursement.
It is normal. That actually is the norm. Please continue.
Yes. So when you see it at the national level, it speaks probably of a much worse situation than we've been told. But I think for me, we need to understand the broader context and the reason why we are where we are, because all we need to look at is the government expenditure programs and priorities. And I think this has been part of the conversation. I've seen it on Twitter, especially from the government economic advisor, saying that last week the collections that came probably the last 2 or so weeks went to debt payment. And it was a choice between salary and debt. but that should not be news. Because if you look at the constitution and the public financial management, debt charge is the first charge and is the priority charge on government expenditure. So it is not a question that you are choosing between salaries and debt.
It wasn't a choice for the CS Treasury to make.
Yes, it wasn't a choice for the CS to make.
It's cut and paste in law that any money that you have, first of all, pay debt.
Yes, first of all, pay debt. Then the second charge is now salary, public salaries and wages and emoluments. So that's how the priority is. Now the suppliers and other people, constructors and all that, are somewhere down the line.
Vendors.
Yes. So
some of them years down the line.
some of them decades down the line.
Yeah. So the two are the priority charges. So the law is black and white. But when you're talking about debt, it speaks about a broader problem of cash management. Like public debt, the nature of public debt is that you know them 10, 20 years down the line. Like most of the bilateral loans that you're taking, other loans that you're borrowing from the market, like the domestic market or whichever source you're borrowing, most of the time the government is given a grace period of 5 years. Now, the reason why I'm given a grace period of 5 years is to allow this money to move and transmute in the economy by the time you're repaying this already generation of income on the either taxes or whatever side of the economy is. So like now what was being paid last week, as the political leaders are telling us, or as the Kenya Kwanza leaders are telling us, would have been anticipated even more than 5 years ago. So
we knew it was coming.
We knew it was coming. So what that tells us is there is a problem of cash management and probably a challenge of contextualizing the actual situation of the economy.
But then when you say it's a problem of cash management, this is where the issues come in. So, I mean, these things come, the payments are periodic. But at the end of them, every month, there's something that's going to be paid.
Yes.
Right? So there was a heavy one that was coming out in January. There's a heavy one that's come at the end of the quarter one now in March. It was known. If we say it's an issue of cash management, how else could they have managed the cash if they didn't have it?
You see, ideally, you are supposed to establish like a sinking fund from all the regular collections. A sinking fund is that you always set every revenue that you're collecting, you are setting aside a component that is going towards the anticipated loan repayment.
So you put in some money for that.
Yes. So when you collect money in January and you're not paying debt, it doesn't mean that you spend everything. It means that you anticipate that in 3 months' time, there'll be a heavy movement. Just like now, we have been told that there will be another heavy movement in September. You do not wait until the collections of September. You set aside this money every so often, so that by the time you're having this heavy consumption or heavy movement, you're not caught by surprise. But then I think we need to put these numbers in context so that we can be able to understand what we're talking about. Now, I'll just break down into 3 key milestones. The first one is the Kibaki administration. So if you look at the central bank data, I'm using the central bank data specifically because when you look at other data, they might tell you something different. But when you look at the central bank data, in December 2002, that is when the former late president Kibaki was elected. The public debt was 630 billion as at central bank. If you look at the time he left office in March, this last month, full month in office was March 2013. The public debt was 1.794. So when you calculate the net change for that 10 years and 3 months, he borrowed a net of 1.2 trillion. Now, when you look at the revenue side of the economy, because this money we are expecting it had a consequence in the economy. The revenue more than tripled. It moved by more than 300 times. Because when he was elected in 2002, government was collecting less than 320 billion. By the time he left, we had crossed the 1 trillion mark. It was actually 1.05 trillion. So you look at that revenue growth was more than 300%. And the debt had grown by 1.2 trillion. Now look at the immediate administration that has left. When they came into office, they inherited that 1.8 trillion. But by the time they left in July, their last month in office was in July 2022. The debt as at the central bank was 6.8 trillion. So if you calculate what they borrowed, it was 8.6 trillion. That is the loan that was with the central banks. It was 8.6 trillion. Sorry for that correction. So they borrowed a total of 6.8 trillion net. Net means that you borrowed some, there were others that were paid. So the net is 6.8. But when you look at the revenue growth, where now we expect the impact to have been, you realize that the revenue grew by about 109%. So this time is not 3 times. The debt grew by more than 600, but the revenue grew by...
to what? 2
Sorry?
The revenue grew to 2 point what? By
0.3.
2.03 trillion.
That was last year.
That was last year's revenue.
Yes. And by the time they took of it, we had already crossed the 1 trillion mark.
The debt grew by what percentage?
It was 6.8 trillion
600%.
from 1.8. That was almost 600.
Isn't that a good increase? It's very nice.
Yes. So you look at the now the question is where is the impact of this debt?
What is the size of GDP by the time Kibaki was living?
Kibaki left when we were almost should be 7. We were around 7, close to 7. Now we are about 14. So now that's where the catch is.
Explain 7 what exactly?
Trillion.
7 trillion.
Yeah,
GDP.
Kibaki left when we were almost,
Our GDP was 7.
yes.
Now it is 14.
Yes, it's almost 14 now, the current projection. Now, this is where the catch is. Now, you look at this loan because the Constitution requires us to borrow for development expenditure. So we perfected what we have been calling project financing and also what we have been calling public-private partnerships. So these are buzzwords that have come up. Now, when you look at a project like SGR, the moment you complete that project, in terms of counting within the GDP, we count the total amount spent. Okay, so if the project was 500 billion, we count 500 billion in the GDP. If you look at the expressway, it's 89 billion, we count 89 billion. So that's how we count GDP. But then we will start now tracing that money in the economy. Because like now we are saying we borrowed 6.8 trillion. Let's find it in the economy.
Let's feel it.
Yes, because that's the question.
What was it intended for? And if it went to the intended destination, do we see what they said they were going to do with it? That's
Yes,
what you're saying.
yes, that's what we're saying. Because now we need to see how this money translates to you and me, how it translates to Mama Mboga, how it translates to the bank, how it translates to the companies, so that we can now see it in the government revenue.
Okay.
Because it has to be in the economy for us to see it in the government revenue. Now, we know there are certain problems.
Please just pause. I want to ask a question before
Yes.
you continue. When we borrow for whatever purpose, among the intended consequences should be what you say visibly, projects and whatever else we borrowed. Okay?
Yes,
It for.
yes.
Now, what about when you say directly to us? What then should we see? Should we see a situation where things cost less? There's abundance of more things. There's more. What should we see?
Or greater efficiency.
Greater efficiency. What is this thing that we should see?
Now, it's not enough to tell us we borrowed for a road and you can see the road. That's
Okay.
not economics.
That's not economics. That's just
That's
road.
not economics. Because that's where the catch is. That's where the catch is.
But you can see 11,000 kilometers of roads.
Now, that's where the catch is. Did the money come to the economy? Now, all over the world, if, for example, you look at the model we'll be using, I said we'll be using something we'll be calling project financing, where we identify a project, link it to a financing and a contractor. Now, we have been using foreign debt, foreign contract, and foreign supplies model.
Hey,
Okay?
even as you say it, it doesn't sound good. You haven't
Yes.
come to the end of it, but it's already sounding bad.
Yes? You see? So I identify this road, it's 20 kilometers. Okay? I want to build this road. What do? I get a foreign contractor
Yes.
and I contract that contract. Then I tell the contractor, go and look for me for money. So the contractor goes and arranges the financing agreement.
Yeah.
And then he comes and builds the road. Now, when we're talking about the money being in the economy, is that now we should, if for example you're using cement, and look at the projects that we have done so many infrastructure projects. One of the key consumable there is cement. So let's go to the cement sector and look at what the cement companies are doing in Kenya. We know all of them are on the loss-making territory. So where is this cement that we're using on the road coming from? The next major consumable is steel.
Where is it coming from?
We're using,
Are we saying that the cement was imported?
that's what the data is telling us. Because how can you be consuming these thousands and thousands of metric tons of cement and the cement companies are not reflecting? Remember, it is the cement companies that are paying taxes locally. It is the cement companies that are supposed to be creating employment. Locally. So if we cannot see it in the that
Cement
sector, it means that the cement came from outside
If
the
I may
economy.
just pause, what then would we have seen that would have signified that we're talking about cement here.
Yes.
That the cement being consumed is locally produced. What would we have seen from the cement factories?
As evidence.
Yes.
One is consumption. We should be seeing it in their revenue. And then if their consumption is growing and their revenues are growing, then you will affect directly now reflecting the government revenues.
So it means the government would have been earning more money and the cement factories would have been doing better.
Doing better and employing more.
And even maybe having more cement companies.
And more cement companies. But the data is not telling us that.
So in essence, you're saying that given what we are saying that was our developmental needs and what was needed to spur it forward, we should have seen a growth, for instance, since we're talking about cement, in the cement industries.
Yes.
Another complementing industries in this particular development process should also have increased.
Yes.
And that increase should have reflected directly in what the government was now receiving in terms of taxes.
Yes.
And we're saying we're not seeing it.
We're not seeing it.
Oh, I see.
Because also, if you look at steel is another major consumption in these projects. The steel companies are not reflecting that. You see, now the other area is we expect a huge spike in terms of the professionals in that sector. These are the engineers. So where are the Kenyan engineers in these projects? For example, we built road X, Y, and Z. We are producing quite a lot of students from the universities. These students, we are spending on them because you spend.
We train them.
We train them.
Yes, we do.
We train them from our pockets as parents. But they also use government money through help. So when they leave university, we should be seeing them within the economy. So we need to see a spike in the demand for engineers in the economy. But we're not seeing that.
What do we see instead?
The unemployed. And many of them have been told to become...
But we've seen the growth in TVETs for that cadre of employees.
But where are they being employed?
On the roads.
Because you look at the employment data. Go to
drivers of the graders.
Look at the official employment data. Now, the number of people employed in the formal sector of the country is only 2.9 million.
So,
last year.
So who's building the roads?
That's the question we need to answer. Are they locals?
So are we saying that...
Are they locals?
Are we seeing that many foreigners doing 11,000 kilometers of roads?
Now...
Because 11,000 kilometers of roads.
Let's look at a good example. We have a road outside here.
Yes.
How many Kenyan engineers were working there?
You tell us. How many? We know Kenya were overseeing it.
Because if they are there, it has been built in the last 3 years. If they are there, we should be seeing it in the employment data.
How many
it's
Kenyans?
Not in the employment
how many
data.
Kenyans did we see working on that road? Many.
We saw very many.
What kind of work? What kind of work they did?
What cadre of employees,
yes.
Kenyan employees, did we see on the road?
Yes, because now that the component here is the quality of work. Because if you're spending on this kind of projects, they should be speaking to the quality of the work.
Okay.
So here, if, for example, I'm simply employed as the cash or the guy who's just driving and I'm paid 500 shillings, it means there's a very small component of the project cost that is getting to the local economy. And that's the only point we are seeing these debts in the local economy. Because if, for example, we are not seeing it in the steel industry, we are not seeing it in the cement industry, we are not seeing it in the motor industry, because in the motor industry, they are the caterpillars and the trucks and all that. If they're not being bought from the local companies here, it means that the money that we're borrowing, it never leaves the capital city where it was borrowed. Because I'm borrowing the money, I buy cement from where I borrowed the money, I buy the trucks from where I borrowed the money, I buy caterpillars from where I borrowed the money, I bring engineers from where I borrowed the money. So what I have is a loan, a debt voucher, and a road.
Okay. Yeah, you pause right there. So is that not the sort of scenario that when you are taught Economics 101, you expect from a grant? But this is, you're saying it's a loan. It's not a gift we are given. It's money we are paying.
Yes, it's not a grant.
Yeah, so if it's money we are paying, how then did we agree that everything that could have helped us develop, for which the money was intended? Because essentially what you're telling me, we're giving money which then goes back to the country that gave us the money.
Yes, that's exactly what we have, and that's what has been the problem with our debt. And that's what I'm saying, we don't see it in the local economy. You see, if you look at the procurement law says that we use 40% of the local products in these projects. But the
40%?
40%.
Why 40? Why didn't they make it 60? Are we saying that we didn't have local capacity? So they were saying at the time we made that procurement law that 40% would more or less occupy us adequately given our capacity. I'm merely asking because it's our country. We're the ones who are going to pay for this money, and you're telling us that we can only use 40% of what is produced locally. Why?
You see, when we were making the law, probably that it was in the context of the environment.
Okay.
But what we are saying is that's the law right now. But the point I'm trying to put across is there's no country that has developed with the model that we're using for infrastructure and development.
Have we always used this model?
No.
When did we start using this model?
When we started using the project financing component that I'm talking about.
No, this specific project financing model, because are you saying all project financing models are structured in this way?
The recent project that we are doing.
Precisely, which means they were tailor-made in that particular way.
Now, if you look at one of the big projects that we started with, it was the Thika
Super Highway.
If you look at the model of Thika Super Highway, it was very different. Because a huge component is the government borrowed the money from African Development Bank. It was the major financial.
And then used the money
to government. And then they contracted people. Okay, based on that, you're able to dictate who works on this project, where do you source the materials, and
how they work.
But then we have another problem that you and me know for our country. And this is where the trap is. We know many of these projects are decided by tenderpreneurs outside.
Yep.
And then they are sold to the government. Now, one of the key things we know these brokers do is theirs is to broker the contract to be signed. And once the contract is signed, they get their 5% or 10%.
And they're done.
And they're done. And they get out of it. Now, the moment it's on the other side, now it's on the government side, we start padding these projects. We start having so-and-so wants X, Y, and Z. Political leaders want X, Y, and Z. So you find a project that costs 10 billion. Eventually, the final price and what you are borrowing is 50 billion. You see, that's the trap. Because now the actual cost of that project, which is now the actual impact on the economy, what we call the GDP component, the right GDP component, is probably only 10 billion. But the project is contracted for 25, 30, sometimes 50 billion. And we've had all these stories across board. So what that means is that you're borrowing money, but part of the borrowed money, actually a big percentage of the borrowed money is outside the project, is on padded costs. Now, when you start looking out for return on investment, because the return on investment is what we're supposed to be seeing in the revenue government revenues.
We actually won't see it.
You won't see it because all the return was already consumed somewhere in the padded.
This one is even worse. What you describe is even worse than what you've just said. Because if it was padded and the local industries benefited from it, this drought that we're now seeing in terms of development outcomes would not be there. But you have a situation where everything you say is a constant, and then the money that we are given is tied in with everything else that goes into that project, and it is brought from out. So essentially, the money comes here in theory.
Yes.
But in practice, it stays exactly where it's supposed to come from.
Yes.
So the impact it's supposed to have locally is zero.
Is zero.
No, sorry, it's negative.
Because
zero if it was 10 billion to 10 billion, yes. But it is 10 billion
to 8 billion.
And then there's a 50, which is the actual cost. So it's actually negative.
Yes. And that's why now when you start now paying the loan, you don't have the money in the economy.
You can't have
because now you should have the money at the revenue side. So you're not seeing the money in the revenue side. If you didn't employ people, you didn't spur the local industries, related industries, so they didn't pay the government money. So it means that now you start using money from elsewhere to pay for a loan that is not within the economy. And I like giving this example. If, for example, you look at the village where you come from, and you walk there with 3 million now to build a house, and you build up that house in the next 6 months, won't everybody in that village know, looking at the size of that village? Will they know there's money in the economy?
Know they'll benefit.
They'll feel it.
They'll benefit, they'll feel it. They'll experience it. As you say it in the proverb. The moment the money is there, this is a small economy, and you're spending 3 million here, then you are going to feel it. Now, our economy is not very big. So, having a project that is 100 billion and all that, we should actually
you should be feeling it.
And not only feel it, we should be able to see it.
Okay, so we'll come into now. Can see where the rain started beating us, and now let's start understanding the intensity of this rain when we come back out of this break. Dr. Patrick Muinde is an economist. He's a financial expert. He's here talking to us about our crisis that we see now. The government is having challenges paying its workers' salaries. It's been having challenges disbursing money to the counties. So that's also affecting development at county level. What's this? What's the problem? What's our Public Finance Management Act saying? And what are the responsibilities of all the other institutions that we established in the Constitution?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Economist and financial expert Dr. Patrick Muinde. So we are where we are. And Dr. Muinde, you've taken us through the journey of how we got here. We looked at the Kibaki years and how much debt they're taken. We've looked at the Uhuru years and how much debt they've taken. And the question we're asking ourselves is, was that debt actually utilized for the purposes that it was borrowed? If it was, then we'd have felt the impact. That was the argument, right?
Yes.
We'd have felt the impact by now of 6.8 trillion shillings borrowed in 9 years of the Uhuru administration to do all those infrastructure projects, whether it's roads, whether it's stadia, whether it's dams, whether it's, what else is infrastructure?
Road.
the railway lines.
Railway, yeah, all those things would be feeling the impact of this. And the economy itself would be feeling it in terms of KRA being able to raise more in terms of revenue than just the 2.03 trillion shillings that they managed in the last financial year. Higher. Now, we know these things. We have institutions in place that should be able to answer these questions. Institutions that are created by constitution and by law. First of all, there should be a debt management office that is in the National Treasury, that is delinked from direct control of the CS for the National Treasury. Number two, there's a controller of budget, right?
Yes.
There's the Auditor General. And then there's the body that oversights the executive called Parliament. All these bodies, what role have they played in this?
First, we look at the constitutional offices. Now, if you look at the audit reports, consistently, they've raised up these issues. So in terms of audit, the reports are there. But the Auditor General is not the end.
What do the audit reports say?
They have questions about when you look at all these questions that have been raised about the billions that cannot be accounted, questions of value for money. Now, that value for money is what we are talking about. We can't see the money.
Yeah.
They've also kept on talking about these inflated projects and all that. They have kept on talking about the accountability of these resources. But the Auditor General in the public sector is not the final. Auditor General reports to the citizens, but through Parliament.
Right.
Okay? So now the onus of acting on this report is on the citizen, but through the elected representatives who are members of Parliament. Now, we have seen hot issues get from audit, they get into parliamentary committees, and then they die. Of course, we see a lot of noise during the questions and answers. But when the final report comes and we are voting for it, everything dies. Now, what happened in between, your guess is as good as mine. So that's one of the side of the weakness. Of course, we saw the issue of the control on budget recently. And some of the issues that I was spilling in public that try to imply that office is not independent as the Constitution has established it or as envisioned for it. And of course, we saw years back one of the loans, the Eurobond loan that was raised up, I think that was Eurobond 1. There's a time the control of budget said it didn't see the money. The next thing we saw was furious reaction from the executive, and everything went quiet. And up to now, the question of whether that money really came to the exchequer first as required today has never been answered. Okay, we have also had interesting scenarios around this borrowing. You look at like Eurobond 1, Eurobond 2, you find the money has been borrowed, and when you go to the website, you don't have the what we call the instrument that borrows. because the prospectus, call it the prospectus, the technical language. So for example, if you want to raise money in the stock market, the first thing that you give us is the prospectus. Why you're raising this money, what are the terms and what are the conditions and all that. Now, if you look at the Eurobond, Eurobond 1, Eurobond 2, and I think Eurobond 3, we got to a point where you have borrowed the money, it is issued, is in a foreign account, in a foreign country and all that, but you can't still see the prospectus 3 months, 6 months, almost 1 year down the line.
So the people who are lending the
so
government,
it's been coming much late.
Are they not relying on the prospectus to actually lend?
No, that has been the question. Who is this foreigner
who's lending us money without a prospectus?
Yes, that's a big anomaly in that's a big anomaly in financial markets, because the instrument that we use to raise money, whether you're issuing shares, you're issuing bond and all that, is the prospectus. But you have had cases where you're trying to trace the prospectus 1 year down the line, you can't see it. Like Eurobond 2, the prospectus was made public when we were issuing Eurobond 3.
Where?
You see. So these are serious gray areas in that process, because the question is, could we now, does it imply probably you are simply borrowing our own money?
Who should have asked this question? Parliament.
Parliament should have asked, but also the citizens, because this is a public document. You're going to borrow on our behalf. So how do you borrow without a prospectus? It's just like telling me you go to the bank and they give you money and they've not shown you the distribution and all that. So that's a big anomaly that has happened. But then when we go to the main institution that is the voice of the citizen, it's Parliament. Now, if you look at how the debt structure was done from the Constitution removed absolute power from the executive in terms of borrowing.
Yep.
Because the reason why this was coming up was because the executive, what we had learned before the Constitution was the executive had become, it had gone, probably abused their authority and their power in terms of using debt. So Parliament was introduced to bring a level of accountability and a check on the executive. Now the problem comes where, like now when Treasury is borrowing, they request Parliament to allow them to open this borrowing window. If you look at the request that have been submitted, the first one was 2016. It was always 10 years. We want you to open us from this amount to this amount to give us a borrowing space for 10 years. And that was happened in 2016.
So the debt ceiling is a 10-year ceiling.
It's a 10-year ceiling. So you give us that bandwidth.
Within the next 10 years.
Next 10 years.
We'll borrow up to
this amount.
Okay.
Yes. But what has happened in the last 10 years, the first one was done in 2016. By the time we were in 2017, we are requesting to move to 6 billion. That was a window of only 2 years, actually 2.5 years or so. So they already exhausted the first allowance. So then they came to 6 billion. And then 6 billion, the instrument that was taken to Parliament, again, all asked for 10 years.
Yep.
And then they now decided to change from pegging on the percentage to an absolute number. Now it's another indicator that there's a problem because the law had envisioned a percent of GDP. Because for us economists, using debt is not a problem. Borrowing is not a problem as long as there is ability to pay. And the ability to pay for the government is only the economy. So that's why it was pegged against the economy. Because that's one that tells us the ability to pay. But they came and said, now let's also change the pegging to an absolute number. And again, it also came for a 10-year period. And that was passed in 2018. It was moved to 9 billion. And then in less than 2-3 years, it was exhausted. It was the request again to increase.
When you say exhausted, what do you mean?
You see, when we say allow us to go to a limit of 6 billion.
We should borrow up to 9 billion.
In 10 years.
Essentially,
9 trillion.
That borrowing should be spread out over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Yes, but us to spread it over 2 years.
No, we spread for the document that is taken to Parliament request for 10 years.
Yes,
but we exhaust it in 2 years. We use the money, we borrow.
In that 9 billion, we get it. It doesn't take us for 10 years. It takes us for 2 years, and we want to borrow again.
No. You see what he's saying is, I want you're telling that when Treasury takes this requisition to Parliament, they tell them, we want now to be allowed to borrow up to
9 trillion shillings.
9 trillion.
Meaning our limit right now is how much?
Now, at that time, we are around 6.
6. So we essentially want to borrow 3 trillion more.
Yes, but in 10 years.
In 10 years' time.
Yes.
So we don't want to borrow. It's not as though we're going to say give us 3 million today.
No.
No. It is 500 billion.
Over the next 10 years, whatever.
Yes.
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
And what do we do instead?
Now, Parliament approves that.
They do, eh?
Yes, they
The
approve
10 year.
for the 10 year.
Okay.
But the executive uses the window in only 2 years.
Okay.
So after 2 years, they come back and say, open again.
But shouldn't then Parliament ask them, when Parliament passes, it's for 10 years.
yes.
So, in law, what does that mean? That you cannot abrogate the 10 years. What are the legal What's the legal significance in all this?
Now, the legal significance is that the executive cannot borrow beyond the limit Parliament has approved. And
So they have to come back, if they want to borrow more, they have to come back to Parliament.
to ask, yes.
Okay.
For Parliament to open again.
And they did.
And they did. Now, the problem is...
Did we hear of them questioning why it didn't take 10 years?
Now, that's the problem because they have not questioned. Every time they're given the voucher, they open again. So they've been open in the past and the past
And then they
the
expect
past.
us to think well of them and to think that they're actually capable of doing what they're supposed to do and to thank them for the work which they are doing.
Yes.
When evidently they're doing none.
Yes, because for example, if I gave you a window for 3 billion or
Yes.
3 trillion in 10 years, and then you come back after 2 years, I should ask, why did you exhaust in 2 years?
What did you do with the money anyway?
Yes, and where is the money? Because that's the accountability Parliament is supposed to be asking.
That's it. The where is the money question.
Yes.
So it's okay. So you actually borrowed this within 2 years.
Yes.
Sour.
We
It's
get
okay.
that.
It's within the limit that we allowed you to. Where's the money?
Where is the money? Because that's what now we should be asking. Where is the money? How is it impacting employment?
Yeah.
How is it impacting revenues?
All those things you
My
said you're going to
voters.
do with it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because now Parliament is supposed to represent us. So the Parliament should be asking, now, before we open for you again, can you show us how this money has translated into employment, it has translated to government income, it has translated to services to the citizens, and how it is improving the economy?
Patrick,
Yes.
so you followed these conversations. Are you saying that Parliament did not ask these questions?
It did not.
Are you saying that no single member of Parliament asked this question?
We can look at the answer. We have not seen it. Because, you see, the problem is...
So when it goes to Parliament, Parliament now is structured in committee stages. Which committee receives this report and looks at it in
the
greater detail?
budget
Is it the
appropriation.
It's a budget committee.
There's a budget appropriation committee. But also it also goes to the plenary of the House.
It goes to the plenary, but with a recommendation from the budget committee.
Yes.
So first of all, the budget committee looks at it, and there were no questions raised.
Yes, and they're not asking those questions. They had questions.
And then they take their report to the plenary for the whole House to discuss.
Yes.
And there are no questions raised.
There are no questions. In fact, the only attempt they made to ask questions was the last one when they opened from 9 to 10.
This is now Eurobond how many? 3.
We have done Eurobond 3. so Eurobond 4 is the one that have been
So
put
it's
on shelf.
Eurobond 3 that they were asking the
That they
questions.
started. And this was Duale asking that question.
It was actually the election. It was because of the question of the election. So when they were opening to 10 trillion is when now the issue came up, because now the citizens were asking. Because now we are towards the election. And the members of parliament were finding a lot of pressure from the citizens. So this is the only time they tried to be a bit questioning. And it's the only time they allowed up to 10 trillion. So they allowed 1 trillion outside the 9 trillion. But it was because of the election. Now, they haven't been elected. From the time they have been elected, we have had nothing. Even the question of the cost of living,
Then
we have had nothing from
I think
Parliament.
that we need to be kind to Parliament. They are consistent. They never ask questions of the things that we consider pertinent. They never do. So, for consistency, 10 out of 10.
Yes, they have been consistent on that.
So this situation that we are in, our members of parliament, especially the 65% or more that have come back from the previous parliament, are aware of the situation,
no,
right?
yes,
We can say that.
Yes.
We can say that the then deputy president, who's now the president, is aware of the situation.
yes,
The current deputy president, who's a former MP for Madeira, is aware of the situation.
yes,
The current leader of the minority in the National Assembly, who was a member of parliament and a member of either the finance or the budget committee in the last parliament, was aware of the situation.
yes,
So all of them, they are aware.
yes.
Even the current chairman of budget was a member of parliament
Yes.
before.
Yes,
His members a majority of them were a member of parliament before.
Yes.
Current chair of finance was a member of parliament before.
Yes.
Current chairman of PIC and PAC, Mbadi PAC, was aware. He was a leader of minority before.
Yes, yes.
All these guys are aware.
Yes.
So when they ask questions like, oh, this handshake, this and the other, they are just...
Now, if you look at the conversation that we are having, it's not about the real issues. We are having a political conversation rather than what we are supposed to be talking about. Now, you see, I keep on saying this, and I've been consistent about this. You can never cheat economics. And economics is not theory. It's not a book. Okay? So when you're talking about these issues, they are real. And if we say you use symbol economic, because even I've seen some of the conversation from the Twitter and the advisors talking about.
From Dr. Nd's Twitter.
Yes. And they are trying to make it academic. It's not academic. It's not about theory. It's symbol. And right now, the way economics has grown, they're very simple, practical means of dealing with the economy. Now, I'll give you a very good example.
Okay.
When you look at what happened over the weekend and the sentiments from the top political leaders, now for us as economists and analysts, it's a big problem. Because one, the government is the one that underwrites the economy. So the moment we are saying that we are broke, what are you telling businesses? And what are you telling me? The government is the spend of last resort. The government should be the final defense to the economy. Now, when somebody at that senior level speaks the way they are speaking, they send a message. We call them, technical term is sentiments to the economy. So you are telling the businesses, stop investment. You are telling businesses, stop recruiting.
Even those that you want to borrow from, you're telling them, stop lending me.
Stop lending me. Because I'm struggling.
I'm not sure I can pay you.
Yes, because you see, me when I say the government is broke, it doesn't have consequence.
Yeah, but when the government says the government is broke,
when CS Treasury says that, it gives us direct signal to the market. Now it also gives signals to the consumer.
Yeah.
Last time we were here and we were discussing, I said what we are calling GDP is purely turnover, money turning over. So when you tell citizens the government is broke, you are telling them, tighten your belts. So we stop spending. Now, what we know is that when consumers respond, they respond more than is necessary. For example, when we are cutting our spending, we cut more than is the reality. Because now we are caught up, we are spending out of fear.
It's
and
panic.
I think, yes, and I saw, you look at last week, we saw a lot of consumers, a lot of motorists are not driving. They've left their cars at home. Now, you put taxes on fuel and you expect to collect money from those taxes.
And no one is consuming that.
And nobody is consuming the fuel. You put taxes on M-Pesa, and now because everybody is saying cost of living, we cut what you're doing in M-Pesa. So we lose the target. And that's what I'm saying, when you see senior officers in government speaking, there's a language that can never come from them.
Should never.
It should never come from them. When they speak, they should inspire confidence.
And we have a situation where the speeches we hear do the complete opposite.
Yes. And then the other problem here is when we keep on blaming the former government, what are we saying? It is 8 months after the election. You are the one who is in government. So when you tell us they borrowed a lot of money.
Consistently, not just once.
Consistently.
Yes.
What do you want us to do? To go and bring them from where they are? And bring them to come and sort their mess? Or what are you telling us? You see, for us and for management, economics, we cannot, that can never sell. It doesn't matter what they did. And the assumption is that when you are running for that office, you must know where you're going. So you must have inside
prior
information.
knowledge.
And I can relate this when you look at the transition from, I think, Clinton to Bush Senior. Clinton, and you look at his biography, he spoke about it. The government in office, especially when they have mismanaged the economy, they don't tell you the truth. So they will always give you less than is the reality. But it is your responsibility to understand and how to respond. Because you look at, and Clinton, I quote Clinton because he's one of the most consequential president in terms of economics in recent history. The first thing that he did was to hold a conference of top economic advisors before he was even sworn in. And their responsibility was to understand where the economy is and then find a working
Formula.
Practical and simple, that will help them kickstart the economy.
This president has done, even before he was elected, he formed a caucus of top economists.
Yes.
Who advised him even in the manifesto, who advised him in the campaign messaging, who then, after he assumed office, he elevated into a council that advised him on how to run the economy.
As the council met, and when did they meet?
The Council of Economic Advisors.
Yes.
See,
We don't know.
We don't know.
And that's what I'm saying.
We know they're in office.
You borrow from Kibaki.
Yeah.
Kibaki, every time the council met, it was news, primetime news.
Yeah.
We never had primetime news. And that's how you inspire confidence. If the council
So we don't know whether Ndii meets with these people.
We don't know. We have not seen it. And the message that is coming from...
We know they exist, by the way.
But we don't know
Yes.
whether they meet.
Yes, and the message that
But
is
we see
coming...
Twitter.
Yes, but the message that is coming from that office is pessimism, insinuating fear, and telling us,
And telling
it's
us
the other guys.
they are the only ones who know. We
Yes.
don't know.
Yes.
So, 10 a.m. Dr. Muinde, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for joining us. You'll come again soon.